Welcome to the Author Blur podcast. I'm your host, Eric Maynard. So today I'm talking with Nauman Raja, and we had a good conversation about his book, The Land of Amer, why he started writing, what got him into fantasy, the fact of how much he enjoys the story, and so much more. I encourage you to listen to the show. Obviously, you're already starting to listen to it now, so I appreciate you being here. You can also watch the show if you're not on Rumble and YouTube. A lot of times you'll hear these shows where we talk about you see this or they show you this or they're holding things up. So you can still watch them there and see what's going on. And of course, you can see either my smiling face, the guest. He also is, as you might be doing, available in streaming audio about any place you want. You can go to authorblurb.com. There, you'll find all the information on the guest, previous guest, and the information on upcoming guests. I also have there listed where you can go and donate to the show. Every little bit helps out. I mean, I have to pay the bills, and the more you help, the more I can provide. So, with that, thank you. Enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you afterwards. So this is Raja, and he's written an amazing fantasy book. I could probably go in. I've read the description. I've read the reviews. They all sound amazing. But instead of me going in, the best person to describe it is Raja himself. So if you don't mind, thank you for being here. I
Thanks for having
appreciate you
me.
being on the show. Could you tell the listeners and everybody a bit about yourself and a bit about your book?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Eric. Appreciate that. My name is Nauman Raja, and I'm the author of The Land of Amer. I'm roughly 30 years old, living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, I came from a small village in Pakistan, around 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And, ever since I came in, fantasy was like the biggest thing around. With the Lord of the Rings and the Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Right.
And I really got into that. And but my English skills wasn't that really good since coming from foreign land, real young, and then reading these books in school. I really couldn't read, so I kind of put these words and images, stories together in my own head, and that kind of like build my likings for fantasy, and that kind of dove into creating the Land of Amer. And the book essentially is a high fantasy novel, a graphical novel as well. There's a lot of artwork in there describing the locations, the people, the main characters. But the book itself is like unlike uh, the Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones that are real European rooted. This is a fantasy that's rooted in the South Asian, Middle Eastern mythology. So it is a fantasy book. It is has dragons. It has witches and elves, but different forms
All right.
that I took from Middle Eastern mythology.
All right. So you said that, and I think I've read it somewhere where you said that the writing helped you learn the language and all this. What actually got you into figuring out that trying to write all this down is going to be what helps you learn the language better and then end up turning it? Because I can understand like writing, getting that practice is a good thing, but to go from learning a language to just writing a little bit to writing a complete novel.
Yeah, no, the book's not really related to when I was growing up,
All right.
but the building my own world through not understanding the words really inspired me at a young age, and really got my my imagination running. When you don't understand something, like if you go to a different land, you know, you got to piece it together, and
Right.
that's what inspired me really to learn and dive into European stuff. I really didn't know too much about you know Essex, or in places in London.
Right.
And I read that in history. So at a young age, that's inspired me to um, dive in to essentially fantasy, sci-fi, you know, uh, and around 2017, I would say, when I started really writing The Land of Amer itself.
Okay.
I had it building up in my back of my mind, um, that I wanted to write something, and really it started with the name. The Land of Amer really started the story itself. It's just the title. And just like I said when I was young, I just took the title, thought about it, pieced some things together, and slowly started building a story. Um, so essentially around 2017, I would say that the Land of Amer itself really rooted and started it to build.
All right. So what actually got so with the Land of Amer, what was it that got the story started? What was it that inspired you to start writing? You said there's a bit of Eastern Asian, Middle Eastern kind of mythology in there. Was there a specific mythology or a specific story that you knew of growing up that inspired the story to start?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Um, Around 2017, I was working in technology, and I still am.
Right.
You know, the whole 9 to 5 every day, and then I was really watching a lot of like TV shows at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just between 8 o'clock, and one day I can't explain it. Like the Land of Amir just hit my head so hard. And then, I started diving into just thinking the idea. If you look at my background, that boy right there was the first name, Ismail.
Right.
Started with that. Who is Ismail? It really is, writing a story and delving into just like how you research a page. I knew that I wanted to write a fantasy story. I didn't know it was going to be about a Middle Eastern fantasy story.
All right.
But like I think growing up, coming here, and like I explained when I was young, kind of build that up, and I think the idea just flowed. I really can't explain that, how the ideas flowed, but mid 2017, I started writing down some chapters, with
Mm-hmm.
Ismail and Nimra, who's also sitting right here below.
And
And
just
I presented, yeah, it
and
just
sorry,
flowed.
but
And
for anybody that's listening through the audio, he does have the book cover where his main character is showing on his screen. So when you
yeah,
hear him say that it's here, don't think he's just know that he does have a video that is going to be on YouTube and Rumble as well for people to look at. Sorry to interrupt. I figured it's
yeah,
easier to clarify in case somebody's
yeah,
wondering.
yeah. The Land of Amir, there's two main characters, Ismail and Nimra. Uh, Ismail is the young prince, ones that live behind the Golden Wall. They're isolated in there by themselves for thousands of years, so they don't really know what's beyond it. If you look again in my background, there's darkness in the clouds in
Mm-hmm.
the south, and that's what the story really is. It's about light and dark. And Nimra is, just like she's a chasm. She's an elf creature that lives in the north as well. She's also predicted, or shown in the cover.
Okay.
So Eric, I really, just like any author, I will say, the imagination just came out, and
Right.
I explored different stories, I explored different plots, and then I presented them to my close family and friends, my sisters, around 2018, and said, hey, I had this idea, crazy idea, this fantasy book, and they read it, and they were like, you should explore, you should explore more into it, and that kind of grew into the 30 chapters that we have in the first book. Um, but yeah, like I said, the building over the years, in the back of the mind, subconsciously, around 2017, it kind of took off.
So when you're saying it's light and dark, so are you saying that between the guy and the girl, they're basically two opposites or yin or yang, or I don't know what the
Yeah,
actual, but
yeah.
are
So,
they competing against each other? Or is the conflict between them, or are they
uh,
against somebody else?
so yeah, that's really interesting. I'll put to, as Ismail and Imra as Frodo and Sam. That
Okay.
they're companions to the end. And I wanted to show them first in the cover because they are essentially like Sam and Frodo. They're best friends. They met in weird, uh, circumstances, and
Mm-hmm.
they got to work together. And the real story of the 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 dark side, it's kind of a mystery. The main bad guy in the first book doesn't is not presented, and he won't be presented until further into the third book.
Okay.
The story itself is the badness in humanity itself. Like these, you know, so the main bad guy in the story, I don't want to give too much away
Right.
at all, is that it's an entity, but
Mm-hmm.
the real badness is in the humans themselves. Um, so that's why it's not predicted in any of the pictures who is the main bad guy. But
Right.
the first person to meet is Saint Lawrence. He lives Midlands in the book, and he presents himself as a holy pope. But something seems off about him. But the actual arch, or like the Sauron or the main bad guy, he's not really predicted or too shown in the first book, or maybe even the second book. But we kind of leave him a mystery, I would say.
All right. So this also brings. So it sounds like it also brings in a little bit of European elements as well, with the popish, the saint, thing like that. So it is sounds like it's more than just a Eastern Europe, Middle Eastern focus. What I guess what would you call the differences of what standardly people would read with the European or the American style fantasies to what you've written, where it has. So when I think, like, I can say, to me, the idea of Middle Eastern fantasy, the oldest thing I can think of is the Arabian Night stories and Aladdin, things like that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what comes to my mind. What is your story really? Because I enjoyed those immensely, but I'm trying to understand where yours is coming off as Middle Eastern, Eastern Asian to bring in those elements. What of those elements are in your story?
Yeah, definitely. You know, this goes back to the opening. When I would read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Mm-hmm.
it was based in, I think World War II. In the
Yes.
era around the World War II.
Mm-hmm.
I read it. Didn't know, like, it was in, like, when I was 10 years old. I
Right.
understood bits, but then I read the actual World War II book.
All
And then
right.
you can see the similarities. The Land of Amer, the way it works is that the places and locations and the names and the people and the way they dress, the animals didn't interact. They're heavily based somewhere around South Asia.
Okay.
From like China, there's some creatures that I pulled, some creatures from or locations from Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
some stories that I looked into Yemen and their folklore. So there's a lot of those elements in there that the readers can be that are European or American, or that a lot of fans that are in Australia, that maybe if they don't know about, hey, what is this animal, they research it, and they're like, oh, it's in Afghanistan, that's interesting, so it's that kind of psychological connection that I wanted to make through fantasy to the Middle Eastern,
Right. So
that type of interpretation.
So you're using real animals. Are you using real places, or are you
Um,
using fictitious places?
so real like some real places and some fantasy. The Tower of Light. You know, it came through like real places in a fantasy place. Like if you look in the book cover, it looks like the Spain uh, cathedral. The
Mm-hmm.
way that the arches are, and then there's a holy light off of it. So
Right.
we're using real churches, mosques, uh, way of showing stories and different ways of people living. In the north, they really live with uh, like how people live in Pakistan: open fields, green grass, farming lands.
Mm-hmm.
But in the south, in different locations, like in the desert, they live how people would live in Afghanistan. Tribal connected people in different rural areas in the desert. So that type of story, a little different to fantasy, how they're all, a little bit different than what normal fantasies are told, in essence.
Understand. So I guess here's another thing is you said you've been here since you were 10 years old, or a little bit
Yeah,
before
roughly.
10, I think you
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
So
7.
7 years old. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So with that being said, how much of what you remember growing up are you bringing into your stories, and the culture you remember from that being a part of what you're bringing in, or what are you doing with that, or is it just not even a part of it?
So the I've been to Pakistan a few times. Went home back to the motherland. Um, I came from a real small village. On
Hmm.
top of a hill.
Okay.
And that was isolation.
Mm.
We had when I was growing up, camels make deliveries. Once a week. We played cricket in the fields, play with animals. So, the story, and how I pulled it in, um, it is, not all based in Pakistan, but it's pulling a lot of all Asia, South Asia.
Right.
You know, um, I did research, how people interact in villages compared to how people interact in cities in Karachi, and that's how we split many of these up, in the north, in the south, in the east, and the west. Uh, and that comes from like interactions like how it will be in the desert in southern in Afghanistan. How the tribes would interact each other. So the story is not really from through my experiences
All right.
as growing up in Pakistan. It's really a combination of different events, or folklore that is driven into the story.
All
Um,
right.
like I will give it a good example would be like Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
How Game of Thrones, how the Northerns speak and interact with each other, and they lay lands, and how the Southerns, in King's Landing interact each other, where they
Right.
always say, my lord, my king, but in the North they really don't say that. They really don't. So it's like that. It's just like how George R. Martin brought a lot of European into that his series
Right.
is we're trying to do that with the Land of Amer, where it's
Okay.
not really based in my experience. It's based in the whole
It's based in the
Southeast Asia.
culture
Yeah,
itself.
the culture. Yeah, definitely in the second book we're expanding on that. We're researching more into you know like for example in the second book it's based in the Western kingdoms, and they're really like castle-based people where they
Okay.
have fishing, they have mud diggers, they have slavery. So it's really different than the North. So that's really interesting in the second book where we're diving into where there's heavy populated people, where there is a king that's like interacting with their citizens.
All right.
Unlike in the first book where the North, they're real isolated. So the first book is really about isolation and coming out of isolation. So that's if I had a subject of the first book, I would say it'd be isolation. How they're hidden behind this wall, where they're not really interacting with humanity. And the first chapter is how they're actually, opening the doors, leaving, and they heard about this threat. But the second book really, like I said, it dives into really opening up the world, just like how you will see yourself in like King's Landing or something.
I understand. And you're working on the second book now, I imagine, or?
Yeah, yep, we're in full swing. We got at least 300, 50 pages in, and this book is going to be, double the size of the first one, since the main characters are spreading out through the land. There's many plots happening. There's the deserts, the mountains, the Moonlight Sea, where the West Kingdom is. So the second book is really going to be expanding the rich mythology from South Asia, and I'm pretty excited about that.
All right, well, that sounds exciting. So,
Yeah.
with that, what is it that actually pushes them to go out of this isolation? Because most people that grew up stick in isolation, they get comfortable in that isolation.
Yeah.
They, like where I grew up, it's a small town. In fact, I think my mom just told me the other day that our one blinking light in the town just went away. So, yeah, I know. She told me she listened to one of the episodes and I mentioned the blinking light, and she said that that's been removed. So I can't even say I'm from a one blinking light town anymore.
Yeah, even the light left.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that in those areas, they were born, they were raised, they didn't, and they have no urge to even go out of I would say, a 50-mile radius of their home. They're just happy, they're comfortable. What is inside that radius that they're comfortable with, they don't remove. I can tell you, I had a cat that's been, we're in more states than a lot of people I grew up with have been in. So, what is it in your book that pushes your characters to not be like, I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm happy here, I don't need anything more? And again, there's nothing wrong with that if you're one of those people, but what is it that pushed your characters? There has to be that kick in the butt that makes them move. What was it for them?
Definitely, and and I agree. And I also come from that small town where people hardly leave, so the term isolation is heavily used here too. So
right.
That's a good question. What really kickstarts this? These people who are standing behind this amazing golden wall, where it's never been overtaken, they have never been attacked, and essentially the Tower of Light really expands their lifespan. Where I explained before, Ismail, he's just a normal Norm. Norm in the books are just people that live 1 to 50. But the light itself, the tower, the blessing it gives them, they get long life. And I agree. So long life, they're definitely going to stay behind the wall.
Right.
The prologue is in the book. It really describes the golden age. The prologue in the book, in the first few pages, it describes a great battle that took in the golden age, where the first king, the High King Om, who still is the king in the first chapter of this book, where he's a little bit older, but a little bit more corrupt as well. He kind of saw what was in the south. He battled the entities, and he thought he vanquished them. And then he went back in the north and lived there with his kids. And in the first chapter, the doors open, and you see this massive army marching out. And in the book, the way I kind of like writing my style, my book, it's a real puzzle of a read. Not everything, but essentially why things are happening. It's hidden, and I kind of like to do that because I come from like back in the day when I was a big into video games. Not everything from like my kind of games are like presented right away. So readers really got to put it together. And in the first chapter, they open this door, why they leave in their isolation, and the reason really is that they heard the dark clouds are coming. There's something of an entity that's growing, and King Om himself feels that he needs to fight this. So the first chapter really is just these youngsters. No of the elders that live in the north, the king himself, are leaving. They are just like isolation. They stay behind. They send their kids and their 4 kids in this amazing attire in the first chapter, and they're heading out to this land that they've never seen for a reason they really don't know. Um, so that really what kicks it off is confusion. The king ordered this. Hey guys, go to the south, figure out why uh, this horrific acts are happening in this city called McMad. That's the first chapter. And investigate. And that's what really starts this. Why they're leaving. The king has a feeling, and he sent his troops, but only the youngsters. And there's a reason why the youngsters are only being sent. It's in the book. I can tell you, but I don't know if you want to leave it up to the readers. But there is a reason why all the old people are staying behind and only the young troops are leaving in the first chapter.
Well, we have to leave something for somebody to read.
Yeah, and everything in the first chapter is new to them. They've never been beyond the Golden Wall. So what they see past that in the Southland is new. The land is new because the Tower of Light doesn't spread. The grass, is dying in the south. You can see, my background, the dark clouds and the trees. I don't know if you can see it, are dying as well. And the tree over here is blooming.
Right.
So the clouds itself are, it's in the book, it's more than that. They bring destruction, and they bring like this evil curse, where like a voice echoes in your mind to do something bad. So that's what the dark clouds really bring. Getting into the book, the clouds themselves are like an ominous sign, where if the dark clouds are near, that means the people are beneath them are corrupted. Where there's voices echoing in the south of this entity that persuades you to do sinful things. So in the land itself, since the clouds are covering the sun, it's dying, it's decaying. The animals are slowly, withering away. So first chapter, when these soldiers go, a few steps down their golden gate to the south, they notice the grasses are less greener. Trees are not that healthy. Animals are not that, visible. And that kind of adds this ominous tone when they get closer to the city and a few chapters beyond, where things don't look to be, what they thought, because they're coming from this amazing heavenly place, from their Tower of Light behind the Golden Gate to this darkened, dimmy place. Kind of uneasy feeling to the teens and the kids in the army. So.
All right, so they're stepping out into the great unknown.
Exactly.
Facing fears and challenges and all sorts of stuff. Like I
and
said,
that's a good interpretation of isolation, stepping out of your boundary, fearing the unknown. That is the real term of isolation, of how to, get out of it. So that's the only way I can put it. How they can overcome is through doing.
Well, makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's do this. What can we actually, where can the readers, where can people listening to this show, where can they go and find you? Because I have a profile set up for you on authorblurb.com where people can go. You gave me some links for your books there. Where do you want people to find you? Where can they go and keep track or stay with you so that they can find out about the next book? What's your best places you like people to be at to find you?
Yeah, thank you. The book can be found for purchase through Walmart.com, Amazon.com, Bookshop. If you just go to those locations and just type in the Land of Amer, it should pop up for purchase through, paperback or through Amazon Kindle. I'm really active on Twitter under the Land of Amer handle. They can find me there. I'm pretty active on the Amazon page as well, underneath the author page.
Right.
I talk about, hey guys, there's a book sales coming up, or there's a free ebooks coming up. Um, you can find that at there as well.
Sounds perfect. So I encourage people to go, obviously, find the book, Land of Amer, read it, get ready for the next book, and just follow along through the whole storyline to enjoy it. With that being said, I'm going to end the conversation for everybody else. If you can hold on for me for just a second, we'll talk a little bit more after.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. So that was the show. That was my conversation. As always, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time, and I hope you keep listening because the authors do enjoy having people listen more to them. You, the readers, are just as important as anything else in the whole process, and that is what this is all about, reaching out to you. So take time, give me a rating, review it, go to authorblurb.com, shoot me an email, and let me know what you think. Anything to help out, I greatly appreciate. So again, thank you. I hope you have a good day. And as always, I'll talk to you soon.